Social Security is one of the most complex and confusing federal programs. With over 2,700 rules, it's no wonder that we're confused about when and how to start collecting and who to turn to for help. Welcome to Social Security Answers from the Experts, hosted by Martha Shedden. In this podcast series, Martha meets with professionals to provide you with the answers to questions about this most important financial decision. And now, here's your host, President and co-founder of the National Association of Registered Social Security Analysts, Martha Shedden.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great show. I am your host, Martha Shedden, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Doug Carey to the podcast. Doug is a Chartered Financial Analyst and is currently president and owner of WealthTrace, a retirement and financial planning software company for consumers, as well as financial planners, I believe.
Right.
At WealthTrace, he helps people every day with their financial and retirement planning questions, including a lot of questions about Social Security. Doug has a master's degree in economics and was a financial advisor and registered investment advisor in Colorado for 10 years. He has over 28 years of experience in the finance industry. Doug, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you majored in economics and you became a financial advisor. Tell us how you progressed from that start to developing software for financial market. What problem did you see that you thought you could improve on?
Well, so I was a financial software developer for a bit, and the company I worked for was bought, and I eventually decided I wanted to leave, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. And then the 2008, 2009 financial meltdown occurred, and I had lots of friends and family coming to me with questions. And they did not want to use a lot of them didn't want to go to a financial advisor. They wanted to handle things on their own, but they were really worried. So I'm getting lots and lots of questions from people. And I thought, you know what, I should be a financial planner or a financial advisor locally here. I think I'd really enjoy it. I had the background for it. And it would be a switch from what I was doing before, which was basically programming and leading a team of financial software developers. So anyway, I start off in this path, and I'm looking for financial planning software, and I didn't like anything that I saw. And I thought none of it was user-friendly. So being a software developer before, I started building my own. And as I started building it, I thought, you know what, I think other people, consumers could use this if I build it the right way. And so I went down this other path, and, you know, long story short, I ended up focusing more on my software and selling to consumers than everything else.
And you do also sell it to financial advisors, I would think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have two versions. One's for consumers, one's for advisors.
What is the mix of users? Is it mostly financial advisors or more consumers?
More consumers, about 3/4 consumers now.
Okay. I can understand that need to want to be in control of your own planning. And with software now, it's possible. There's a lot of people that don't work with financial advisors.
Yeah, and as younger people get older, all of these folks are comfortable with the internet and doing things on their phone, their iPad, whatever it might be. So every day it's more and more people who want to do this on their own.
So do you find, I guess this goes for both your consumers and the financial professionals, are they using it to manage their assets and the accumulation of wealth, or is it helping them more to do the retirement drawdown and decumulation process?
It's actually both at this point. It didn't used to be, but a few years ago, we allowed people to start linking all their investment assets. And so everything gets pulled in every night, including all of their holdings, their transactions. They can view historical data. They can view their fees they're paying, their fund performance. So it's really become a wealth manager as well. You can't trade, of course, but you can really get a full view of what has been going on with your investment assets. So you can look back, see what has happened, and you can obviously look forward with your financial projections.
Okay, that sounds really unique that you're combining that access to their accounts. I mean, I know other software does that, but
yeah, usually it's one or the other. There's nobody that really does both in terms of being able to aggregate everything, dig into your holdings, see what you own, see what your transactions were, and then also be able to run a full-on retirement plan.
so as a financial advisor, then, are you still working hands-on with these individuals if they have questions, or how does that work?
No, I separated that out for legal reasons, right? The financial advising part. We offer support, of course, and then we also have a service where we will walk people through their plan with them, kind of line by line in a sense, for an extra fee, and help them understand what every input means and kind of coach them up on if they've made a mistake, maybe there's an entry that doesn't look right to us. So it's more of an audit of their plan and walking them through it.
Right, you're not giving advice, you're helping them with the software.
Yes, that's right.
So how does the software deal with clients, users' Social Security claiming decision? If so, how does it do this?
So there's a simple scenario in the software where you can just move this little slider and say, I want to delay my Social Security by X number of years, and the program will calculate the changed payment for you and then project out how much you'll have each year going forward, including at the end of your life expectancy. And really, that's kind of what it boils down to is, well, which one will give me more money over time, right? And it also gives you the probability, your Monte Carlo probability of success in the different scenarios as well. So which one gives me the higher probability of success? Which one gives me the most money? So it's a very simple way of running it right off the bat, but there can be more to it, such as combining it with different withdrawal strategies. And that's where it gets really interesting, because usually I find that most people should delay. As long as their life expectancy is above 80, most people should delay taking Social Security till 70. Well, that's what the math says, right? So just by the math of it. However, depending on how they're making up for the money that's not coming in before age 70, that can really change things. And that's where it gets kind of interesting, and where they might need my help to kind of point out, hey, here's what's going on. And I'll show them the numbers in the software and say, see, you had to withdraw from this account and you don't want to do that. So delaying is going to create a tax headache for you, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that was my next question, because that drawdown is such an intertwined puzzle between taxable and non-taxable accounts and Social Security taxation of that income. So does it automatically search for the most tax efficient way for clients to use their funds?
That would be a neat algorithm to have. It's so complex. There'd just be so many different scenarios. However, it starts you on the right foot. It defaults to taking from taxable accounts first before it takes from your qualified tax deferred accounts, because 99% of the time that is the most tax efficient way to do it. Now, what people do is they go in and they can change the order of withdrawal from the accounts, just kind of drag and drop your investments in terms of the order in which it occurs. And people can lock out accounts and say, I don't want to touch this for 20 years. I never want to touch this one. I'm leaving this to my kids, whatever. So people get really fancy with it, and they can kind of back into the best strategy in terms of withdrawal.
So they could wait to use their Roth accounts as opposed to their regular IRAs.
Right, exactly. That's a big one. People like to lock out their Roth account for a set number of years.
Right, but then I know that sometimes to bridge that income gap, if you're waiting to collect, it's not an entirely bad thing to use some of those regular IRA or other funds that are going to have RMDs, because that can lower the future income and taxation.
Yeah, generally, I find that trying to withdraw from IRAs today to lower RMDs later doesn't usually help, because it's either they get you coming or going, right?
Yeah.
If they're going to do that, it would make way more sense to do a Roth conversion.
That's true, because you're going to pay tax on that when you do that.
Yeah. So why withdraw?
Yes.
From the IRA? You have to think ahead, though. You have to you want to do the Roth conversion over as many years as you can, where your tax rate isn't very high. So these are other things that our software gets into, which is Roth conversion scenarios, and shows you the best years to do it. You can easily see where your tax rate's lower.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how many people had no idea that they should be doing a Roth conversion. There's a sweet spot, which is before they get Social Security, obviously before they take anything out of their qualified accounts for RMDs. So a lot of people don't realize they might have a few years of super low income tax rates, and they're primed for a Roth conversion during that time.
So that taxation calculation's in there, so they can sort of play around with it and max out the tax bracket that they're in.
Yeah, that's right.
And change the amount of Roth conversion or IRA conversions.
Yes.
Okay. I can completely see how the younger generation will really take this on, because they're so comfortable with software and understanding that. I mean, a certain amount of them would, I would think. What about back on the Social Security? What about for couples? Does the software allow couples to decide when, who's collecting a spousal, if that's possible, and separate filing dates for each in the couple?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people do that. They'll play around with changing when a spouse might take it. Maybe one person delays and the other one doesn't, and so they just kind of go back and forth and try to optimize the best way to do it.
Okay. And does the software use their earnings, or does it just use the PIA that's given to them by Social Security?
They can estimate using their earnings, but we always recommend getting the number from the Social Security Administration website.
The PIA?
Yeah, the PIA is the most accurate, obviously.
Okay. In your article, Social Security later can be better, you state that Social Security might be thought of as the safest annuity you can buy, and I totally agree with this. So can you explain to our listeners that may not understand this, the value of planning for Social Security claiming, and how we can increase that value by planning for it like every other asset in their retirement portfolio, because it's such a huge amount of money over 20 or 30 years of retirement.
So by planning for it, do you mean planning in terms of when you might take it, or making sure you get the right number?
Well, we get into the nitty gritty at narssa as Social Security analysts, and especially with families, they may have young children, a younger spouse who is eligible for child and care spousal benefits. So it's such a personalized decision when you get into that precise analysis that we use with our software. Mm-hmm. And we often see increases in their lifetime and annual amounts of thousands of dollars. And I think many financial planners don't understand how this decision is really a valuable thing to help their clients with.
Yep. And I think that it gets glossed over quite a bit, which is, okay, you're going to take it your full retirement age and let's move on to the next thing. But it can have a big impact. Also, depending on how they're projecting out their numbers, a lot of people think that Social Security, think they won't be taxed on it. Right. And
they don't know.
It's hard that calculation's not easy. Of course, our software does it. The rules are all in there, so it's pretty accurate. But if someone's trying to do it in a spreadsheet or a free calculator, it's just not going to be right. And like I said, a lot of people don't even understand that here's another problem with the Social Security benefit is the taxation is it's not indexed to inflation.
No, I was just going to say it's increased. Like when it was started in 83, the first threshold, it affected maybe 10% of retirees, and now it's at least over 50%.
And 8.5% inflation isn't helping that because now more people are being bumped up. So pretty soon everyone's going to be taxed on it,
right?
If they don't index it to inflation. And it's pretty brutal, but it's also a stealth tax. And if that's not all taken into account, some people might really mess up their plan thinking, hey, I'm going to have $40,000 a year in Social Security and my wife is going to have 30. We're set. But they're not taking into account any taxes or whatever. And that's a problem. So that's just one aspect of planning for. Then here's another one. The index that it's tied to, the COLA, cost of living adjustment, has not been keeping up with regular inflation.
No.
Now that's continuing this year, unfortunately, as wages, real wages aren't keeping up. And that hurts the Social Security payments, right? So the purchasing power of Social Security payments is declining if COLA doesn't keep up with real inflation.
Right.
So these little things add up, they compound, right? Anything that involves a growth rate is compounding over time.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. And that's actually what I was going to ask you next. If you had the power, because I know you understand Social Security well, how to extend the Social Security program, how to make those fixes, what would you change from your point of view? What would be most beneficial?
Well, there's the quick fixes that get thrown around all the time, which is, well, just tax income up to $1 million instead of, I can't remember what it is today,
147,000.
Okay. So of course that would help, right? That gets into a huge debate about who should be taxed and how much and all that. And it might not ever happen. And then of course we could extend out when people can begin to take Social Security. But again, you get into issues of, well, what did you promise people?
Yeah.
Is it fair? Is it right? It depends what age groups you're talking about. So there are lots of problems that come along with these things that get thrown around. Well, it seems like a quick fix, but politically it wouldn't be, I don't think. But to me, one issue that it's always been there, that's always perplexed me, is how it's invested. The Social Security, the money that's in there
In the
is
trust.
invested completely in treasuries.
Yeah.
And the annual return on those treasuries, as of at least last month when I was looking at it, was 1.5%.
Right.
So inflation's 8.5%. They're earning 1.5%.
But are we willing to let them put that in the market?
So it comes down to the amount of time it gets to stay in there, right? The longer the time horizon, we know stocks will beat bonds over a longer time horizon. I think the figure is over a 20-year time horizon, bonds have never beaten stocks. So it depends, right? You don't want to throw it in stocks and then keep pulling it back out again. It has to be set up in a smart fashion to where the money that goes into the stocks, it's in there long enough to reap the reward of, a longer time horizon where we know stocks will do well enough.
Right, because pension plans, that's what they're doing with their assets, right?
Yes, and now pension plans, so yeah, it gets into another problem with a lot of pension plans, which is, well, they don't have enough money, a lot of them.
No.
So they're withdrawing tons of money from it to pay what they owe, and they are underfunded. And of course, Social Security is going to be there as well. So that's another problem. And all these pension plans, they're all in. They're 100% in stocks and real estate and who knows what else, right? Some of them are in private equity and all kinds of crazy investments that is such a gamble when they're already underfunded. I'm not talking about any of that. I think just at the very least, a third in stocks over a long enough time horizon and keeping it all on treasuries, especially when it's losing money every year to inflation right now, at least.
Yeah.
It's just set up as a loser.
Yeah. As an economist, what do you think of you talked about it has to apply the changes we need to think about, future generations. I mean, the changes made in 1983, which were so significant, they're just now, those folks are now just turning 62 with the full retirement age of 67. So it was over many, many years. And the FICA amount, the 6.2% for Social Security, that hasn't changed in decades. And if that were to go up really, really slowly at 0.1% or something over a long time, do you have any thoughts on that as a way to bring more money in?
I just like things to be paid for. It's like a toll road. If you're paying money on a toll road and that money then goes to fund the building of a casino 500 miles away downstate, that I don't like, right? The toll road's supposed to be, I'm paying for the road that I'm driving on. Right? And that's good because the people who use it are the ones who are paying for it. Now, Social Security, I want it to be such that if they're paying more in, then they should be getting what they're paying in, they should get it back out again at some reasonable rate of return. I really wouldn't want it to be we've got to increase your FICA taxes to make up for the fact that we botched it over the last 50 years, right? We're now making up for it by punishing you guys with higher taxes. So if that's the case, I don't know the numbers exactly, but if that's the case, I don't like it just from a fairness standpoint. I think that it should be, your money goes in and you should earn a decent rate of return on it and get it back out in Social Security payments.
Yeah. And most people get much, much more out than they ever put in, including their employer share. So I guess you'd have to consider what was the rate of return on that, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And that's the problem, right? You have some people probably don't get what they put in, and some people get way more. And some people that get way more, it's another issue that my clients are sometimes surprised when they find out that their spouse can get half of their Social Security. But it's like, hey, my spouse didn't work and she's only going to get $5,000 a year. And I say, no, she can get half of yours. And they didn't even know it.
Right.
But that's a drain on Social Security as well, the ability to take half.
Well, there's a lot more dependents too, besides this, besides just the spousal. And I mean, there's minor children that, someone passes away at a really young age, their young spouse and young children are able to collect Social Security based on those earnings for many, many years.
Right.
If they're still young, but I don't know what percentage that is of total beneficiaries. It's a really, really complicated problem, that's for sure. Based on your experience and knowledge, what are the top 2 or 3 most important takeaways that you would give to people approaching retirement about either their Social Security claiming and or their retirement planning?
So I kind of touched on it. I think a lot of people don't think about delaying, and some of them have valid concerns that I've talked to that have thought about it but decided not to. And that is, well, they might cut my benefits because they're running out of money. I hear that. And so they want to take it as soon as possible. And, my belief is that, well, if you're taking Social Security now, you don't have to worry about your benefits being cut. Maybe, 15 years from now, there will be a major problem with people that are just getting into it. But I don't think they're not going to cut Social Security for people who are already receiving it, right? That'd be political suicide, basically. So the delaying aspect, I don't think enough people look into it and think about it and run scenarios on it. And then there's, as I was saying before, the taxation. I think some people, they do a back of the hand calculation. They say, well, my expenses in retirement will be $60,000 a year. I am going to have $40,000. My spouse will have $20,000 in Social Security. We're good to go, because they don't think it's going to, they hear, or maybe they say, well, the most that can be taxed is 85%, and or maybe they do a back of the hand calculation, but they really need to know the exact projections, right? So they can make good decisions. Otherwise, they might quit working too early. They might stop at 55 when they need to work another 5 years.
Right. And you can't really do those projections without using software.
No, there are too many moving parts.
Right.
Right. And it's just impossible. People start messing around in a spreadsheet and they just get tied up in knots, basically. And you just can't do it. It's too many things going on with taxes. And like we were talking about, Social Security has its own rules for taxation. So that all has to be accounted for as well.
Yeah.
And, I think that there are people that worry, as I was saying, too much about Social Security benefits being cut in the near term. I think longer term, we need to certainly worry about it. But shorter term, I have people saying, well, I just cut my Social Security projections by half because they're not going to have the money to pay me. And I just say, well, that would be shocking. I wouldn't.
Yeah. And before I understood Social Security back in 2011, I was not even counting my Social Security because I didn't realize the enormity of the amount that you collect. And well, if nothing's done by 2034, which I find very hard to believe, but they would need to cut current benefits by, maybe 20% or so.
Well, that assumes that they don't move the money from somewhere else. They can fund it, right? I mean,
No, what they're using right now is the surplus in the trust fund.
Mm-hmm.
And that surplus was created by legislation back in 1983 that created this extra amount. And that surplus has been being used. And now the interest on the surplus was paying beneficiaries. Now they're using the principal of the surplus. So in 2034, it would revert to the pay-as-you-go system from that it is designed as, and there are not enough working retirees to pay for the benefits of the beneficiaries.
Right. But I suppose Congress could always pass a law or change a law and say, we're taking money from here and we're moving it into here to help fund Social Security.
Yeah, I don't know. There's not an intermingling of that. The Social Security needs to make changes by 34. And I just think there's so many aspects to the program, though. I'm confident that changes will be made. And a whole combination of different little changes would be best over a longer time.
Yeah.
And that's why the media, every time the trust fund, the trustees report comes out, everyone's up in arms because they think it's going bankrupt, which isn't the correct term at all. It's just used up its surplus amount and it would be pay as you go. But I'm confident that won't happen. It's still a little unnerving, though. I think there'll be a lot of some changes coming definitely in the next decade, but you can take care of that in your software.
Yeah, and people do it there. There's actually a scenario to cut your benefits to see what would happen, right? And
that's a conservative thing to do, to consider that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Where can our listeners go to find out more about your software and possibly use that? Where's the best place to get in touch?
We have a 7-day free trial. They can go to mywellthtrace.com, sign up for a free trial, link your accounts, play around with it, and even run some scenarios.
Great. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please tune in every Wednesday for new episodes. Our expert guests share a variety of topics related to retirement and their expert knowledge. See you next week.